Three kinds of hearts represents what? Represents what? Three kinds of rocks represent three kinds of hearts. Okay. So there's a person who hears, they've been thinking about God, a purpose in life. Why am I on this earth? Where am I going to go after I'm dead? Why is there injustice in the world? They're asking themselves these deep philosophical questions. That is not most of us. But there are people like that in the world that genuinely ask themselves, not what's for dinner, but what am I doing here? What is truth? What is justice? They ask themselves these deep philosophical questions. You call them geeks and weirdos. History called them philosophers. You might even have friends like that are really nerdy. They're thinkers. They don't really like to go to the party. They don't want to go hang out. Every time you see them, they're reading a book. Or they're just gazing into the stars. Just lost in thought. Those kinds of people, they're always lost in that kind of deeper thought. So when the solution to those problems is brought to them, and it clicks, is there any hesitation before they just gush out and say, yes, this is it. This is what I was looking for. Immediately there's an excitement. Just like a rock, that what happens to it? Water just gushes out. Water, by the way, in the Quran, water is representative of purity. Water represents purity. And water also represents faith. Water also represents faith. So water inside the rock is faith inside the heart. This person had a faith inside of them. They were looking for something to confirm that faith. Revelation came, and it clicked with what was already inside, and the rock just burst open. Okay. Then there's another kind of person. This kind of person isn't exactly a philosopher. They're hyperactive. They can't sit still too long. Maybe that type of person sitting in the audience right now, texting a friend or updating a Facebook status. I saw you. No, I didn't. I'm kidding. I had to call you out. If you felt called out, the joke's on you. Okay, so, they're hyperactive. They constantly got to do stuff. You might have a friend like that. Hey, what are you doing? What do you want to do? Want to go somewhere? Want to get some pizza? Can I come over? You want to come over? I got to do something. Jittery. Can't sit still. Busy in life. These are not the kind of people who think about what is the purpose of life. Why create these heavens and this earth? Why does my soul beg for a deeper meaning? They don't ask themselves these questions. They ask themselves, when will the pizza get here? Right? They're busy in the day-to-day of life. That doesn't mean that they're not spiritual creatures, that they don't have a soul, that they don't have some water is not in their hearts. It's just harder to get to. It's harder to get to. But you know what happens with people like that? A traumatic experience. A near-death experience. Sickness in the family, death in the family, loss of a friend. Something really strong happens in their life and they're shaken, and that rock finally cracks, and what comes out? That faith that was always there. Now it comes out. There are lots of people in the world like that. They go through a traumatic experience and after that they straighten out. I found God afterwards. Before that I was a different person. Then this thing happened in my life and oh my God, I changed. The Muslims in the audience are familiar with the story of Umar, a companion of the Prophet. Pre-Islam, basically the description of a party animal. If he wasn't womanizing, or hunting, or horseback riding, or killing dudes, he didn't know what else to do with himself. He's busy, and 6 years, he's in the same city as the Prophet himself, doesn't know what Quran is for 6 years. You ask yourself, 6 years in Makkah and he doesn't know what Quran is? How did that happen? Well, because he was kind of busy. And even the way he became a Muslim, he heard his sister converted. He's furious. Storms into his sister's house. She hid the scrolls that she had written of the Quran. She hid them. What are you reading? She refuses to show him. He hits her across the face. He's a big guy. So when he hits her across the face, her face bleeds. And when it bleeds, he softens up like, what am I doing? Okay, just show me what it is. I want to read. You know that traumatic experience was a little bit of a what? Crack. That was enough. That traumatic experience was enough for him. That's two. Two rocks, and both of them had what inside them? Water. One came out easily, one came out with a little bit of a force. Okay. How many kinds of rocks were in the parable? There are three. Who remembers what was said about the third kind of rock? False with the fear of Allah. Was there any mention of water in the third kind of rock? That's interesting, huh? So the first two, water is mentioned, and the third one, just falling is mentioned. The outward state, the outward motion is mentioned, but the inner state hasn't been mentioned. What's inside is water. And in two cases, the water did come forth. In the third one, the water, maybe it's there, maybe it's not, but it hasn't come out yet. It hasn't come out yet. But on the outside, at least, this water is falling from the fear of God. This alludes to another beautiful teaching in the Quran. Most Muslims here will know there are three states of faith. There's ihsan, I won't translate yet. Ihsan, what else? I'm going from the top to the bottom. Ihsan, Iman, Islam. The famous hadith of Jibreel, right? Islam, starting point. You graduate a little further, you develop in your faith, you have what? Iman, and then you eventually have ihsan. Now let me translate for the rest of the audience here. Islam is basically the acceptance of faith. You've come to the conclusion that you're going to submit to God. You made your declaration of faith. It's your starting point. That doesn't necessarily mean you felt the sweetness of faith in prayer, that you felt connected to Allah, that it's moved you to tears, that the waters come out of your rock yet. But you keep worshiping God, and you keep trying to stay away from things that stiffen your heart, and eventually you'll start tasting the sweetness of faith, and that's Iman, when you can truly feel the power of the faith. It's a spiritual experience. And then if that matures, you allow it to mature and not fluctuate, and allow it to grow, then the third state, which is described as excellence, ihsan, is reached. Ihsan was described as the Prophet, أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. That you should be enslaved, worshipping God, as though you can see Him. That's an interesting statement, worshipping God as though you can see Him. We can't see God, we can't see Allah. But I'll give you an example that's easier to understand. You guys, how many people here have jobs? Okay. Well, not all college students are useless. Wow, that's pretty awesome. Okay. Okay. So if you have a job, you're sitting at your desk, you're doing work, and maybe Alt-Tab, and maybe Control-Tab, and a little bit of YouTube, and Control-Tab, a little bit of Facebook, Control-Tab, a little bit of something else. But your boss walks by. Back to Excel. Then he took the elevator, Alt-Tab, back to YouTube again, or whatever. If you know the higher power is just watching, you can see Him. You can see Him, meaning He's close. Your behavior changes or no? It does, doesn't it? There's this, if you want to appreciate what fear of God means, there's a guy, he doesn't care about the traffic laws or whatever, he blows by stop signs, but he sees the cop. And all of a sudden, a spiritual fear takes over, and he abides by the law, because that's taqwa for you, right? Fear of consequence. He'll stop. If you see the authority in front of you, there's going to be a different reaction. And this is not just out of fear, even out of respect. Maybe you're talking among your friends and you're speaking kind of inappropriately. Your mom walks into the room. Your teacher walks into the room. Someone you truly respect walks into the room. When we are around people that we respect a lot, we watch ourselves more. We don't just say anything that comes in our mouth. Our behavior changes. Ihsan is when you realize God is constantly watching you. And not just out of fear, but out of respect, out of love, out of consideration, out of appreciation. I'm going to watch myself. أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ. To be in that state all the time is pretty amazing. That would be called excellence. It's the highest state of faith. Now let's come back. A person who's just starting out may not have tasted the sweetness of faith yet. Just like a rock that hasn't experienced what yet? Water coming out. So the rock that had the most water is in a state of, a heart in the state of ihsan. The rock that has a little bit of water at least is in the state of Iman. And at least you should have what? Islam. And in Surah Al-Hujurat, in the 49th surah, what does Allah say? قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا. Listen to this, it's beautiful. He says the Bedouins claim, some people became Muslim, they claim we have faith in our hearts. قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا. You don't believe. You don't have faith yet. وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. Tell them, you just accepted the faith. You just started out. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. And iman, that sweetness of faith, hasn't yet entered your hearts. That water hasn't yet entered your rocks. That's the third state. That's why the third one doesn't mention water. It hasn't happened yet. It's beautiful. The parable is beautiful. And interesting.